First of all, congratulations on this documentary. It is a fantastic watch. It is so awesome to see everything that came from your passion for this. What was it like to revisit this moment in your history?
It was a little bit surreal because, life continues, right? So I did
Mhm,
this thing in my 20s and it was wild and it was a super analog era where Spotify didn't exist, the internet didn't exist, or barely existed, I should say.
mhm,
To go back there, I feel like it was really fun to relive what it was like where you had to see people in person and you had to call them with a phone that was attached to the wall, and just listening to the music. I have been listening nonstop to 90s music ever since I started this
mhm.
documentary, which has been kind of fun.
Awesome. And how does it feel hearing from people how this affected their lives, how it changed their view on what radio is, and how, everybody has a right to it?
Yeah, I feel like everybody felt very strongly that they should be able to have their voices heard on the airwaves, that they should be able to play what it is that they wanted to play, and for other people to be able to listen to it. I feel like I'm not so sure how many people really believed in the cause as strongly as
Mhm,
I did, to the point that they would risk as much as I did, but I think that they really appreciated the community and the freedom of expression and just all the music that they got to hear, and how it was sort of like this little neighborhood secret.
mhm. Definitely. Punk rock is I think punk is more of a lifestyle than it is a music genre. Like there's an exclusivity to it. How would you say that, that the times influenced what you did and how you went about doing it?
Well, the time influenced it because there's absolutely no reason to do what I did
Mhm,
now. But back then, you had a radio, you didn't have
mhm,
Spotify, you didn't have the option of listening to Napster, if you remember that.
mhm,
Um, it was your only options for hearing music were whatever your friends handed to you, going to the record store and getting hip to stuff from the guys that worked the counter, or listening to the radio. And the radio had a very limited options in terms of the music that was getting through.
mhm,
So that was really the difference.
mhm. Things have very much evolved and grown. We have podcasts now. Everybody's able to do those. Uh, how do you see the difference between radio back in the 90s and podcasts now? Because it seems that even though we have more freedom to do what we have, we also have a lot more restriction.
You feel like you have a lot more restrictions
I
in what
believe
you
so.
do?
Yeah, as a podcast, I don't think you are able to use mini songs or put out as much as you would like.
Oh, well, we also were not allowed to use the songs that we were using, but we weren't getting caught. So there wasn't as an easy of a way to monitor exactly what we were playing
Mhm,
and make us pay fees for what we were playing. And a lot of the stuff that we were playing, the bands themselves were appreciating that we
mhm,
were a venue for the music to get out. But I feel like what you're doing with your podcast is super similar to what I was trying to do with my radio station back then, which is you feel like you have something to say, you feel like there's information that you want to get out. Now you just have different tools.
mhm.
So it's pretty awesome.
The FCC was created to help, protect. I don't, I wouldn't even say protect, to help, kind of the balance of, what the people want and what they don't want. And I feel that what happened to you is counterintuitive to what they were supposed to do. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are that the FCC has changed its tune over the decades. So if you watch the documentary, you see this old vintage FCC footage with a former chairman of the FCC from the 50s, where they were talking about how it was their job to regulate the airwaves in the public interest and give access to the airwaves to the people. Now, that is not the MO for the FCC. The FCC's MO is they are regulating and they are mostly allowing corporations to control what is on the air, what gets through.
Mhm.
which is
Since
why
you're
it's great that there's podcasts
yeah,
now.
since your time in doing pirate radio, is there any projects you have worked on that kind of continue with that passion for you?
Ooh, well, I feel like it's the same DIY spirit that I had back then, where I decided to do something that I had no idea what I was doing, but I just thought I would try it and see what happens. Um, there's, I guess, between when I ran the radio station, when I made this movie, there's a couple different places where I felt like I was sort of pushing on the boundaries. And one was probably 10 years after the radio station was busted. I was a motorcycle critic for a major daily newspaper. I was the first motorcycle critic and the first female motorcycle critic. That I think had some parallels just in terms of pushing the boundaries a little bit about what had existed previously.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, that's probably the closest example of that. Yeah.
That sounds awesome though. For
It
you,
was.
looking back at this, was there anything you would do different now that you've known more, you've grown more, and is there anything you think you could have done different in order to help the radio station survive and last longer?
When we got busted by the FCC, the internet was just starting and there was some internet radio that was beginning.
Hmm.
And so some of the DJs, especially some of the more tech-oriented DJs, they thought that we should move to an online format.
Hmm.
And probably because I'm a little bit of a Luddite and I was a little bit fearful of what exactly the internet was. And they were trying to convince me, like, you get to hear, like, people all over the world will be able to hear you. And I felt like it would have been trading in that local community
Hmm.
for a global community that just felt like it wasn't touchable. You know what I mean? Like, when it's just operating in your neighborhood, you know everybody that you're reaching or who is involved with it. And I think on some level that was scary. And then the other part of it was just, I was also pursuing a journalism career, and that happened to take off at the same time that the radio station was shut down. And so that was the path that I decided to take. But, a lot of the DJs that were involved with the station went on to a radio station called Kill Radio online. And some of the stations that were operating in Los Angeles that had a similar experience with the FCC ended up going legitimate and pursuing the low power FM license, doing an online station. Um, so I feel like it's good that somebody did that. It just
Hmm.
wasn't me. And I'm not so sure how it would have, I don't know if it would have felt as magical if I had gone that route.
Definitely. And as talking a little bit about, you building community through this radio, how important was it that you got so much support, so much interest in what you were doing in order to keep putting your own money into this and stressing yourself out just to keep this going?
That was the whole reason. Like if
Hmm.
it hadn't like fostered this whole community, I don't think I would have kept going. Like you saw in the movie that when I started, it was just me sitting alone in a
Hmm.
closet spinning records and nobody was calling. Like how long could you possibly do that, right?
Hmm.
But it was because so many people started hearing about it, wanting to get involved, and that lasted until the day that we were busted. Like I was still taking calls for people who wanted to get their own shows. So it was really the community. It's sort of like a self fulfilling,
Hmm.
like it just feeds you wanting to keep this thing going.
As you were putting all this together, is there any part of your story that kind of surprised you as you revisited it? Is there anything that you found more impactful to you now that you look back at it?
Just that I did it.
Just that you did.
I kind of can't believe that I did do it, especially because
Mhm.
people react to it like, say what now? Like you built a radio station, you ran it out of your closet.
Mhm.
I sometimes wonder like that person was in me at one point. I mean, I can't even imagine doing that now. So
Mhm.
it's just when you're young and you got a wild idea, just do it, you
Mhm.
know? That's sort of what I think. I just marvel at the fact that I did it.
Definitely. And I think a lot of people romanticize, trying to do something like this, but when it comes to it, they don't have the drive or the passion for it. For you, what was it inside you that you needed to let out and create this? What do you feel, inspired it and drove you to fulfill it?
I feel like I was pretty lost, which I think is a feeling a lot of people in their 20s have. Like, what's my purpose? What am I supposed to be doing? I'm playing by everybody else's rules and I'm not happy and I'm not satisfied. Um, for me, you get to a certain point where you're doing something, you have no idea how hard it's going to
Mhm.
be, but you're pushing through, you're making it happen. And then at some point, like you can't turn back and failure isn't an option and you just have to complete it. And I think I'm just a finisher, like, and I would just encourage anybody who has a crazy idea that's a little bit scary that they don't know how to do it to just push through and see where it goes. Because I would never have imagined that when I got this idea to make this radio station, that I would be here talking to you, have a documentary, have been hosting like punk legends in my house, like magic happens when you just decide that you're going to see something through.
Definitely. And now you were a journalist. You were on my in my seat for a lot of times, I'm sure. How does it feel being on the other side now?
I much prefer being in your seat. Yeah, it's a lot more comfortable for me to be the one asking the questions than answering the questions.
Mhm. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time. You have a fantastic story to tell, and I'm so happy I got to see this documentary.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really appreciate that you're interested and that you really liked it.